on the same day the guns in Gaza fell silent under a United States brokered ceasefire, another kind of battle ignited, one over truth and perception. At its center stands Swedish climate activist Greta Thunberg, once celebrated as the voice of a generation, now accused by Israel's government of spreading what it calls brazen lies. As the echoes of artillery fade, a new front opens, not on the ground but online, where words wound as deeply as weapons and misinformation travels faster than missiles. The ceasefire may have quieted Gaza, but the war for narrative is just beginning. Can peace survive when propaganda masquerades as compassion? When images meant to inspire humanity instead distort it? And when global influencers wield truth as selectively as power once was? Because even as Israel extends a cautious hand towards humanitarian cooperation, it now faces another challenge, defending not just its borders, but its integrity. In this war of perception, the fight for facts may prove just as vital as the fight for peace. Still on the wars around the globe. When you hear infrastructure is not collateral, it is the target. What comes to mind? Well, these are the words of President Volodymyr Zelensky when his nation was hit. And what was hit exactly in his nation? How badly was it hit? And does it mean for a country trying to stand through its darkest season yet? What exactly is happening with the war in Ukraine and around the globe? Let us unpack the latest. But before we get into the details of these global headlines around the world, let's take a look at something interesting happening on the home front ahead of La République's election. Welcome to today's Flash News. I am Star Smart. Let's begin. The government of Ambazonia has long maintained a clear and consistent position that colonial elections within the territory of southern Cameroon's Ambazonia are a non-event. They neither reflect the will of the people nor the sovereignty of the nation under occupation. But in recent days, a video circulating online has stirred a debate. A purported Ambazonian activist, Dela Dela, is seen urging southern Cameroonians to participate in the upcoming October 12th elections organized by the colonial regime in Yaoundé. In his message, he calls on Ambazonian fighters to allow citizens to exercise their political will by going out to vote. He argues that boycotting the polls only benefits the colonial regime, as it leaves the field open for their supporters to determine the outcome. Let's take a listen.
I salute all una place day. My name is Dela Dela. I be an Ambazonian activist. I want to give my opinion about that election for French Cameroon. Plenty people, they don't ask question. They don't ask me question if what people they get for votes or not. They be worried. I don't like to stand for fence. I like to give my opinion. Even if it will be unpopular or it will be popular. My opinion be very simple. Make what people then go vote. That lockdown way they put down, it be counterproductive. It help that regime for Yaoundé. It need help what people. Because that very regime, it go can carry their people with armor car, may they go vote. Why we normal civilian they not go fit vote? And then at the end of the day, it shows say we for Southern Cameroon, we for Ambazonia, we don't give legitimacy for that very apartheid regime. We don't displace 1 million people. We don't quarter 10,000 people. It don't make plenty of people be homeless. It don't make plenty of us not get home. That very regime. So if our people don't decide, say, they want votes, make we leave them, make them vote. Any authority, any man, when I be responsible for that lockdown, I beg, remove that lockdown, cancel that lockdown for that day, make that people they go vote. Would you give advantage for that regime for Yaoundé? Would you instead give legitimacy for Pobia and your regime? Make what people then go vote. The election not going to change anything. We know regime for Pobia, how they operate. We know their pattern. But make we leave them, make they go vote. If they want votes. Yes, it will be a learning curve for some of them. They will understand Cameroon better. How Cameroon they operate.
Oh, well, at face value, his appeal sounds democratic, even compassionate. A plea to restore civic participation amongst a war-weary people. But beneath that surface lies a contradiction too deep to ignore. How can a people exercise political will under a foreign system that has long denied them the very right to self-determination? What legitimacy does a ballot carry when the framework itself is built upon the 1961 plebiscite betrayal, where Southern Cameroons were given no option for true independence, only to choose between two colonial masters? By urging participation in such elections, critics argue that Dela's message, though perhaps well-intentioned, unwittingly echoes the propaganda of the annexation regime, one that seeks not to empower Ambazonians, but to validate its continued rule over them. In Ambazonia's liberation logic, voting under occupation is not civic duty, it is compliance. It signals consent to a system that has for decades marginalized, displaced, and brutalized the very people it claims to represent. To cast a vote in that system, many say, is to help sustain the chain that binds Southern Cameroons to colonial domination. Well, still, observers note that Dela's remarks come not from malice, but from a misunderstanding, a humanitarian impulse misaligned with the political realities of a people still under siege. His compassion for the suffering masses is evident, yet his prescription, in the eyes of many, risks undoing the sacrifices of thousands who have fought, bled, and died for Ambazonia's right to self-governance. As one analyst puts it, the ballot of the oppressed cannot be free while the oppressor holds the pen. The government of Ambazonia has reiterated its call for a total boycott of colonial elections, warning citizens not to be deceived by attempts to rebrand participation as progress. The stance remains firm: no legitimacy for colonial rule, no participation in colonial rituals. Well, let's take a listen to President Samuel Ikome Sako, who once again emphasizes this position in one of his recent addresses. Take a listen.
Fellow countrymen and women at home, as Yaoundé prepares its so-called elections, let the world be reminded there are no Republic du Cameroon elections in Ambazonian soil. We declare a total boycott of the Cameroon's election in Ambazonia from October the 2nd until the 14th. We will observe a sit-at-home strike and lockdown across our territory. Why? One, because Ambazonia did not call for elections. Number two, because the exercise itself is a charade and a provocation. Number three, because every election cycle, this junta uses violence to stoke fear, silence opposition, and in the process destroy many innocent lives by staying indoors, shutting the towns, and refusing to participate. We declare Ambazonia is not Cameroon.
Well, now on the global scene, Greta Thunberg's recent social media post intended to highlight Palestinian suffering used an image that wasn't Palestinian at all, but of an Israeli hostage, frail and starving, in the hands of Hamas to show Palestinian suffering instead. The image showed Eviatar David, who was abducted from the Nova Music Festival on October 7, 2023, and forced by his captors to dig his own grave. That footage, released by Hamas as part of a propaganda reel, resurfaced on Thunberg's Instagram feed this week, recaptioned as evidence of Israel's cruelty towards Palestinians. For a world quick to react before verifying, it was a striking case of how misinformation cloaked in empathy can turn victims into villains. Israel's Ministry of Foreign Affairs condemned the post, saying ignorance blinded by hate towards Israel is trending. Thunberg later deleted the image, but not before millions had shared it. So the question lingers: when an activist amplifies the pain of one side while erasing the suffering of another, is that compassion or selective outrage? Well, this is not Greta Thunberg's first brush with controversy over Israel. Her online activism has repeatedly spotlighted Gaza, but rarely the Israeli families still waiting for their loved ones held in tunnels beneath Rafah. She joined flotilla protests, accused of ties to Hamas-linked organizers, and she stood by the slogan, "From the river to the sea," one many view as a call for Israel's eradication. She claims humanitarian concern, yet when she and fellow activists were detained during the Global Summit Flotilla attempt to bridge Israel's naval blockade, her allies described harsh treatment, claiming Israel categorically treated them harshly, which is something Israel has denied emphatically, calling them fabricated stories to stir up outrage. Now, independent footage later suggested that the flotilla carried little genuine aid, reinforcing long-standing suspicions that these missions serve as public relations operations more than relief efforts. Now, if a ship sails under the banner of mercy but carries propaganda instead of medicine, what then is its true cargo? Recent undercover recordings made public by Israeli security sources appears to confirm what Israel has maintained for years, that some so-called humanitarian flotillas are funded or influenced by Hamas and the Muslim Brotherhood, designed to provoke confrontation and generate sympathetic headlines abroad. Participants reportedly admitted that their real objective was not to deliver food or medical supplies, but to expose Israel before the world. Now, if that's the mission, then perhaps the flotillas are not about feeding Gaza's hungry, but feeding a global narrative. And yet, each interception sparks predictable condemnation. Israel is accused of blocking aid and collective punishment. But when intelligence links such convoys to militant financing, should any responsible government ignore the warning signs simply to appear gentle in global opinion? Maybe the harder truth is this: vigilance may look cruel only until the cost of negligence is measured in lives. Thunberg's reach is vast. Her posts ripple through millions of screens in minutes. But with that reach comes responsibility. When her message turns moral certainty into misinformation, what happens then to the truth? Can a movement that once marched for the planet now be marching blindly into political manipulation? And if compassion is weaponized, how long before it stops being compassion at all? Well, this front, more than ever, is now asking for scrutiny. The information war, where images, words, and hashtags can wound deeper than bullets. And so the question, when truth itself becomes collateral damage, who benefits? The peace seekers or those who profit from perpetual outrage? In the end, Greta Thunberg's post may have been a mistake, or it may have been something more deliberate, a symbol of how modern activism stripped of context, can serve causes it never meant to. Either way, it reminds us that in this conflict, as in so many others, facts are the first to fall, and perception often decides the victor long before peace ever does. Well, the Greta Thunberg controversy may have dominated headlines, but while the world debates, posts, and propaganda, history was quietly turning another page in the Middle East. As has been in the news, Israel and Hamas have agreed to a ceasefire, a deal brokered under former United States President Donald Trump's long-touted 20 peace plan. The Israeli military confirmed that the ceasefire took effect at 9 GMT, marking a rare pause after months of escalating violence. In an official statement, the Israel Defense Forces announced from 12 p.m. or 12 o'clock, troops began positioning themselves along the updated deployment lines in preparations for the ceasefire agreement and the return of hostages. For the first time in months, rockets have fallen silent, and families torn apart by war are beginning to hope again. Across Israel, prayers of gratitude. We see it echoing from synagogues and homes, while in Gaza, displaced civilians dare to dream of normalcy. But amid the relief, unease lingers. How lasting is a peace born out of exhaustion rather than out of trust? And can a truce truly hold when the scars of October 7th, 2023 still bleed beneath the surface? And how can Israel lower its guard when experience has shown that quiet skies often precede the next storm? Trump's peace initiative, criticized by some as unconventional yet hailed by others as pragmatic, hinges on a detailed exchange mechanism, the return of Israeli hostages in parallel with the release of Palestinian prisoners. It's a plan that promises humanitarian relief but also demands accountability. Still, in a region where words like ceasefire have been written and erased too many times, skepticism is inevitable. For Israelis, peace without security is merely a pause before the next tragedy. And for Gazans trapped under Hamas's control, the promise of reconstruction often collapses under the weight of militant agendas. So the world has to ask, can the same actors who shattered ceasefires past now safeguard this one? When weapons have been smuggled in crates marked as humanitarian aid, how can oversight be anything less than absolute? And should international applause come before verification, before the hostages are home, the tunnels are dismantled, and the truth of Gaza's governance is laid bare? For now, hope flickers where fire once raged. Children in Sderot play outside again. Mothers in Tel Aviv dare to sleep through the night. Now, with a fragile truce in place and hostages set to return, the next test will be whether peace can rest on foundations stronger than public relations, and whether trust can be rebuilt where betrayal was once routine. As one flashpoint dims, another flares anew on Europe's horizon. Half a world away, we see winter looms over a land under relentless assault. In Ukraine, the battle is no longer only for territory, it is for survival, for warmth, for light. Russia has launched what officials call a massive attack on Ukraine's energy grid, plunging parts of Kyiv into darkness, cutting off water and power for thousands. The Kremlin, it seems, is reprising the brutal winter tactic. Strike what sustains daily life, knowing deprivation is as punishing as bullets. President Zelensky condemned the assault as cynical and calculated, saying more than 450 drones and over 30 missiles were deployed to dismantle Ukraine's energy backbone. He warned that infrastructure is not collateral. It is the target. In Kyiv, families woke up to darkness in the northeast, gas plant went offline, Poltava, Kharkiv, and rural regions teeter on the brink of blackout, amid the upcoming winter cold season. But even under shroud and blackout, Ukraine is fighting back, restoring power when it can, pressing its drone strikes deeper into Russian territory, and demanding that allies deliver not just words but air defenses. Kyiv and much of eastern Ukraine were plunged into darkness early on Friday after Russian missiles and drones targeted critical energy infrastructure, cutting power and water to homes and disrupting mass transport across the Dnipro River. According to officials, more than 450 drones and 30 missiles were deployed in the assault. Ukraine's air defenses said they intercepted 405 drones and 15 missiles. Yet the scale of destruction exceeded interception. 9 regions reported sweeping blackouts and interruptions, affecting some 600,000 households nationally. Now in Kyiv, we see rescuers pulled over 20 people from a burning 17-story building apartment struck by drone fragments. At least 20 people were wounded and a 7-year-old child was killed in southeastern Zaporizhzhia during the barrage. President Volodymyr Zelensky called the strike cynical and calculated, a direct assault on everything that sustains normal life. He emphasized that civilian infrastructure, power plants, gas facilities, water systems is now Russia's frontline weapon. The timing is no accident. As winter sets in, depriving citizens of heat and electricity is a pressure tactic. Darkness becomes a weapon. In this wave of attacks, nearly 60% of Ukraine's gas production capacity is reported disabled. Naftogaz says its facilities in Kharkiv and Poltava were heavily damaged in the strike. Meanwhile, the Zaporizhzhia nuclear plant held by Russian forces has been operating without external grid power for over 2 weeks, relying on diesel generators for cooling systems. The International Atomic Energy Agency, IAEA, says efforts have begun to reconnect it to external electricity to mitigate nuclear risk. Now, despite the blows, Ukraine has responded with retaliatory strikes on key Russian military and energy sites and munition plants, oil terminals, and weapon depot deep inside Russian territory. And the stakes are existential. We wonder, will Ukraine survive the winter without critical heat and power? Can its air defense hold against the next wave of attacks from Russia? Will allies answer Zelensky's call with tangible arms rather than just rhetoric? Well, in this war, darkness is not just absence of light, it is the leverage of the aggressor. Ukraine is now tasked with not only fighting Russian guns, but keeping its cities alive, its people warm, and its hope burning. Away from the words with Europe, we see the world's attention turning to Oslo today as the 2025 Nobel Peace Prize was awarded to Maria Corina Machado, the Venezuelan opposition leader, whose unwavering call for democracy has come at great personal cost. The Norwegian Nobel Committee hailed her tireless work promoting democratic rights for the people of Venezuela and her struggle to achieve a just and peaceful transition from dictatorship to democracy. Now, barred from running in the 2024 elections and forced into hiding, Machado has remained a symbol of defiance and hope, a voice that refused to be silenced under Nicolas Maduro's tightening grip. Well, Trump also has something to say about this Nobel Peace Prize. So many spectators believe Trump has been eyeing the prize for a while now, but that it has gone to Maria herself. Even as applause filled the Oslo chamber, a familiar voice echoed in dissent. The United States President Donald Trump once again asserted that he deserves the Nobel Peace Prize, citing the ceasefire negotiations and diplomatic breakthroughs in the Middle East and beyond. He said, they will never give me a Nobel Peace Prize. I deserve it, but they will never give it to me. Trump had said earlier this year, arguing that his 20 peace plan and multiple hostage release deal stood as proof of his global peacemaking credentials. Indeed, several allies, including Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, has backed his nomination, calling him a man forging peace as we speak. But the Nobel Committee chose differently, honoring not the power broker, but the dissident. A deeper reflection on the meaning of peace is what we'll take a look, because it raises an age-old question. What kind of peace does the world reward? Is it the peace negotiated in grand halls, the kind that ends years of wars on paper, or the quieter peace achieved by those who choose restraint over retaliation, even when justice feels incomplete? In recent years, the Nobel Peace Prize has often gone to those who refuse to fight when fighting might just seem justified, to those who step back rather than strike back. But can peace built on silence truly sustain justice? Or is restraint itself the highest form of courage in a world where confrontation is easy and compassion is rare? Well, these are questions that hover over every Nobel ceremony. A reminder that peace, like truth, is not always loud and not always fair. For now, Maria Corina Machado carries the world's most symbolic Medal of Peace, not because she won power, but because she refused to surrender her voice. And perhaps that too is the kind of quiet defiance that keeps humanity better nature alive. And with that, we've come to the end of today's Flash News here on ABC Amba TV. On to next time, we leave you with ABC Amba TV images. Thank you for joining in.